Hi, time to plait the belly. 8 strands, 4 doubles. That is a tamale, T-A-M-A-L-E. The idea is that as you plait, you pull the strand out and it comes away as a bundle. Means you don't have miles of strands clutching the place up. So first up, to do like I did with these other 3 strands, is to grease the central section, at least. And find the center point. Like so. And here's how you do it. Kind of defies explanation verbally, but happily there's a video camera. Look. Start about down here. Around the hand. Not too tight, otherwise it won't pull freely. They do tangle up occasionally, and it's best to pull through gently, so if it does snag, stop and untangle it rather than tightening whatever knot is preventing it from undoing itself smoothly. The tamales themselves tangle up because they are big lumps on the end of leather and they are off the ground, so you're carrying all the weight. So where possible I prefer not to use them, but the belly in this case is getting on to be the same length as an overlay for a 6-foot whip. So just for convenience I'll use them. Now this is the method I employ for starting double taper strands where the widest point is in the middle. Oh, right, okay. You notice that the bevel is on the top side of the grain, the top edge of the grain side. Or the bottom edge, right, okay, what happens is this. Say I'm plaiting down like that, and all the bevels are on the bottom. You'd think that when I pull it tight, like that, and then fold it over, they'd fit in nice and neatly. But because I'm pulling really tightly, the strand I'm pulling compresses rather more than the one just above it, so it actually slides in underneath. So if the bevels are on the top edge of the strand, like so, as I pull the next one down like that, pull it tight, it'll snug in underneath. Moreover, if they're like that, and it's the end of a bullwhip and you're dragging it along the ground or whatever, it'll tend not to pick up dirt as you pull it this way, whereas if the bevels were on the underside, like so, then that one, which is really supposed to be on top, if the whip opens up a little bit, it'll tend to scoop in dirt. So I just prefer to have the bevels all on top where possible. Very often some are on half are on top and the other half are on the bottom. If you plait all the strands, say right-handed, if you plait half and half, then you can arrange it so all the bevels are where you want. Hence ambidexterity being a good thing. Okay, now I've only got 4 here, and I could sling them over my hand like this and offer them up to the whip, but this is the method I use for any number of strands. There's the middle. See, it's a bit crinkly because this is the second go. Like that. And with the bevels all uppermost, I know that the strands, as I cut them, are paired so the imperfections and irregularities even each other out left and right. Okay, so what I'm doing is now folding the top one on this side down over that one there. And the next strand is going to go over that one, under this one, and over that one. So now I have the makings of single diamond pattern. Similar to this. Here's a section of under one, over one. And as you see, the bevels, can you see? The bevels are all on the top edge of the strand. And I go from under one, over one to under two, over two. Although that's not strictly speaking correct. I go from over one, under one, over one, under one. I'll show you. Now, all I'm going to do is use a single diamond pattern to start off the plaiting, in this case here. Oh yes, I've added a rolled up bit of leather to roughly the same diameter as the fiberglass core, so I can plait down nice and smoothly this way and then the overlay nice and smoothly that way without it being problematic at that point. I've also set up the whip so that the natural bias, because even the core has a natural bias at this point, is hanging at its most natural, so it doesn't want to tend to twist in my hand when I'm plaiting, because as you see I use a hook rather than a vise. Some people use a vise. I've used a vise when I'm doing a riding crop handle, but then that's a rigid foundation and there isn't going to be any problem caused by any torsion in the overlay. But I wouldn't want to plait a thong that way, because having the vise hold the work steady means that if I do have more tension on one side than the other, it might not be noticeable. I might be fighting the whip more, so when it's released there might be a little bit of curly-whirliness to it. I'd rather get the plaiting angle and the tension and everything the same. And it's easiest to monitor, to my mind, by having the work on a hook. Okay, now the normal method when doing this is under one, over one, under one, over one. But, as I say, I'm going to do it the other way around. So it's going to go, the left hand strand has already gone under one, and the right hand one has already gone over one. So I'm going to be going over the right one there, under that one, over and under here. I don't need to pull it tight just yet. I just need to lay all these in place. Then find the top one, which I've held down. Change grip. Find the top one there, which I haven't held down. Right, so over that one, under that one, over that one, under that one. Okay. Now I'm going to go over that one, under that one, and over these two. I'm holding it wrong, aren't I? That one is the one that's going to be the moving strand. So, over one, under one, over two. Grab the top one. In you go. And once again, over, under, over, over. Okay, that's the plait now set up. And the next stitches, let's just make sure everything's all centered. Push that up as far as possible. Oh, that's far enough. Right. We happy? We happy. That's my front sight. What I can do is stick a pin in there, so if it does rotate I can see the pin move, or colour it with pen, or just make a note of where that knot position is. At any rate, I don't want to see this rotate round there one way or the other as I plait. Okay, we've done all the overs and unders. Now it's hand through the middle. If this were 4 plait, it would be under 1 over 1, under 1 over 1. You've got no great options on that, have you? If it was 12 plait, it would be under 3 over 3 at this point. You're the next one, aren't you? Okay, so these are quite wide strands, so wrap it around my fist, give it a pull, and there you go. It's not just how hard you pull, but for how long, because it does take a little while for the strand to do its thing and come round. If you give it one big jerk like that, you might snap it. So there is an element of time involved to each plait, each stitch. And once I've seated all these in position, I'll show you the back of it, what that looks like. Because these are 8 fairly wide strands, I'm plaiting more or less as hard as I can. It is possible to overcook it. I've made whips which are plaited so tightly that they've never broken in. That was a slender thong stock whip with core, belly, bolster and overlay, and having the bolster didn't really help. Okay, now looking at the back of that, you've got under 1s and over 1s, and then you've got an over 2, under 2 over 2, all very nice, all very neat. And that's from starting off in that particular way. If I'd gone under 1 over 1, under 1 over 1, I'd have eventually had an over 3 at one point. Now I'm going to carry on plaiting 4 seam, under 2 over 2, until I get to the end of the handle foundation, and then I'm going to have a little section of under 1 over 1 because it's stiffer, and that will just help to reinforce the transition between the handle and the thong a little bit better. So let's just rattle down here. This will also give you an indication of how long it takes to plait something. It's a tedious business. Some people prefer to sit down. There was a lass I was attempting to teach, and she preferred to sit on the floor. I don't. I like to have room to chuck my strands around if I haven't got them tied up in tamales. And spending too much time sitting on my arse anyway isn't a good thing. Shoo! Standing plaiting for hours and hours, how tedious. Anyone still complaining about how much whips cost? I should bloody hope not. Labour of love, each one of them. And this bit I'm plaiting now, I'm going to chop off. Pains me, I know, but it's part of the design. I want everything to be really tight, and I want the plaiting to be really tight up near the handle. Yeah, you get quite strong doing this. Either quite strong or completely worn out, repetitive strain injury, that kind of thing. I've had to change my methods a couple of times because I got RSI on my hands. Fortunately, at each stage, it improved the quality of the whips. I was putting too much into the core, if you recall that big 8-footer and the even bigger 12-footer in the first video. But loads in the core and then binding them, and I hadn't got the method of binding them off pat, so I was doing this twisting action with my hand, And I did get gamekeeper's thumb, I did. So I removed that and stuck another belly in, another plaited belly. So the quality went up, the handling went through the roof. My hands got better. Although, one constrictor knot. Or one constrictor knot. Whew, right. Almost onto the handle. You'll probably fast forward through this bit. I'm not going to plait the whole blooming thing through to the end. I'll do that wee bit at the end of the handle. And then... oh, that's staying in place. No, it's not really. Ugh, well. And then I'll do another little video of finishing the whole thing off, or finishing the belly off. I was going to do this and then the next one as a separate video, but too many titchy videos, a bit disjointed. Usually I have a peg to hand, so if I need to stop for any reason I can just peg the strands, but I can always just tie a little knot in them instead. See, it's always thinking about videos rather than thinking about making whips. Okay, now we're at the important bit. Now I have to figure out, because there's a little twist there because I was a bit careless. Right? Now I am figuring out where I am plaiting, and it's like this. So that is my datum. When I started plaiting whips, I was using butyl rubber pond lining, which is of course a bit stretchy. So I had to get used to stretching the strands while plaiting at the same rate left and right. Mercifully, leather isn't like that. And also the pond lining, I had to put the tension on it and lay it into place and then clamp it down with my hand, but because it wouldn't slide through like lubricated leather. But the flip side of that is that I'm not dealing now in a very homogeneous material with a very standard thickness, which can be cut in strips from a sheet using a straight edge. So it's all much more variable. Yeah, that butt extension could have been a smidgen neater. Pure pedantry mainly. That's perfectly adequate. Now it doesn't really matter if the plaiting is a little bit wonky on the handle or any other stiff area. Not that there is another stiff area. But it does matter when it's on the thong, because plaiting will give a bias to the whip. It'll tend to curl up like this. And if your plaiting goes off, the bias goes off. So you end up with a whip which doesn't coil nice and flat, and which doesn't handle very well. So everything as straight as possible, all the tensions left and right as even as possible. Need to pull a little bit out from my tamale there, look. Now this, as I said just a moment ago, this is now my centre point. There, that's my front sight, as it were. So I want my thumb to be in line with that. And pull tight and plait loose. Again, that's another David Morgan axiom. Some people plait and then pull it tight. I don't think I've even tried doing that, because I read it and went, okay, I'll do that. But it does make sense to pull the tension as high up as possible, then lay it in place and make it as neat as possible in a nice relaxed fashion. Right, we're off deltoids today, and we're on to latissimus dorsi. Improvement of, because that's what you're gonna get with all this heaving and tugging. At some point, when they start to get a little bit loose, I'll pull these tamales out, because the strands, short strands, just pull through the plaiting much more easily than bundles. But the bundles are currently better than the long strands that I would otherwise have to pull out. Yeah, see, it's a little bit wonky, but that doesn't matter, and now I actually know where the end of the handle is. It does help to make sure that the work is at the correct height for you. I'm not in a regular workshop at the moment, so I have to make do with a hook at that height and different lengths of bits of string. I haven't got around to finessing that because it's not desperately important. So far, not bad. That one's a little bit needs pulling tighter. Where have we got? Okay. Nice gradual pull, feeding in the power, so if you do hear a little or feel fibres giving way, then you'll know you've reached the strength of the leather. Time for some more grease, I think. Or plaiting soap. I keep calling it grease, but I should really use the correct terminology, shouldn't I? Give my hands a wipe on the rest of it, so it all goes in the right place. Okay, how far? Quite. For miles and miles and miles of heaving and tugging. This is why I don't like plaiting really wide strands. Plait up to about 8mm. As you saw earlier, the option was 12 plait belly with 5mm strands, so I thought that was overkill. I think a nice tight 8 plait belly, 7.5mm strands. Ugh! And that's not even at the start of the thong because it's a tapered handle. Most of it anyway. For the overlay, it's going to be even more tedious if I just show you miles and miles of plaiting. So I'll show you the start and the splices, any points of interest. So it'll be a bunch of little short videos probably, apart from the English eye, which might take a little time. as you can hear, it's chucking it down in sunny Wales. Mind you, the holes are pretty much over now. Have a look occasionally around the back of it. This is another reason why I like to hang it from a hook rather than stick it in a vise, so I can keep an eye on all of it, just in case I've flipped a strand over. It's not going to happen with these big wide light tan strands, but when it's say 3mm wide and they're brandy, which is about as dark as you can get without it being black, then the flesh side and grain side look, and in a lot of cases feel, very, very similar. So you've got to be very vigilant to keep everything nice and flesh side down. Now, although I cut these strands with that strand cutter nominally the same, you can see there are slight variations between them. Actually, not an awful lot at this point. It seems to be quite even. Some skins give you more variation than others. The belly for that 5-foot bullwhip showed a bit more, well, the strands, the leather, showed a little bit more variation in stretch, so the strands themselves turn out a bit wibbly wobblier. I think it might be a younger skin, because the smaller ones seem to be a little bit more elastic than the bigger ones. It didn't have as much shaved off the flesh side, so I suspect it's a younger and therefore thinner skin, which will mean it's stronger. The younger animals have a finer grain, a finer texture, so they might not have the same overall strength. Say you've got a 6mm strand, but when you start to get really narrow strands, particularly if you want them thin and are inclined to thin the leather off, then getting a skin in that natural thickness is preferable from a strength point of view. And also, if you're a stingy git and don't like to throw away leather, then it's very satisfying not having to. Looking okay? Oops. Right, I said oops because I felt a little creakiness there. Ahaha, look, see that? That might just be the edge of a scar, and I felt that slightly go. So, what I need to do is keep track of that, and the next time I pull this strand, not pull it too tight. So, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Continually glancing up to my reference point there. 6, 7, 8. And here's this slightly iffy one, so about there is good. As it gets a the narrower section of strands, I might change to holding pretty much like a rein and pulling that and then folding them in. But right now that's not enough tension. Got to wrap them around my fist. Now you can see here the effect of starting the cut at different points of the leather. There's some wide bits and there's some narrow bits. This is the belly. It doesn't matter. What matters is how strong it is, how supple, how firm, and how even. And that's not going to create any lumps and bumps in the overlay. It's just the same amount of leather, but with the cut-off centre, near as damn it. Cutting the overlay out, you tend to use the better portion of leather from the centre. The strands will be narrower and need to go around a tighter radius. Well, the narrower strands of a finer plait can be cut around a tighter radius, such as one would find in the centre of the leather anyway. So it all works out for the best. So the very, very fine plait whips are made from the very best leather right at the centre, which also has less variation in thickness. If this were a 16 plait, it would be under 4 over 4 on either side. Round plaits tend to be in multiples of 4. So you can go under x over x, under x over x, rather than under x over y, under y over x. Like, say I dropped 2 strands and now on a 6 strand, it would be under 1 over 2 on one side and under 2 over 1 on the other side. So you get a short plait and a long plait, but they're offset. Bit more grease, I think. A bit more plaiting soap. Okay, plaiting soap, that's 3 syllables. Grease is 1. I'll get away with 1. And at some point soon I'll probably end up unravelling these tamales because they'll start to snag and they'll start to get a little bit floppy, and I'll pull some strand out and it'll tangle up and I'll go, okay, more hassle than you're worth. But not yet. A few more inches before the next exciting bit. So I hope the camera battery stays okay, and I hope the memory's okay. Oops, no, the other side. So you want, okay. Go. There you go. Okay. Then at least I've got the same amount of grease on both hands. Right. And in you go. Why the bloody hell did I take up whip making? It's just like mad, really. I know why. I wanted a good one and couldn't find one anywhere. And I came across the instructions for making them, and that was that. Okay, a few more inches, bear with me. Yeah, I know it's boring, but hey, if you want to be a whip maker, you'll get used to boring. And if you already are a whip maker, you'll be nodding sagely at this point. If when you've made your core, it's not quite as chunky as perhaps you want up at the blunt end near the handle, you can cut your leather to arrange that the thicker bits fall on that section. So you might have to measure it round with a wee measuring device first and figure out where it's going to be relative to the actual plait. So it's as well really to make sure your core is as good as it can be at the outset, so you don't have to get involved with any of that. I'll probably start maybe 1.5 inches up the handle, and then a couple of inches or so down the thong, and leave it at that, just to just to take the curve, the heat off the transition. Okay, getting there, a bit more.